I found my 8-month pregnant daughter asleep, curled up under a wet awning in the middle of the night. She had nowhere left to go because her husband had secretly sold the house I bought for them and shamelessly married the mistress he had been cheating with for 2 years. I took her home, and the next morning I drove to the place where he was now living. When that door opened, what I did that day, he will never ever forget. The clock on the dashboard of my old pickup truck read 1:17 a.m. Cold rain hammered the windshield, and every drop sliding down blurred the streetlights outside. My bakery, the Haven, the place where I, a 65-year-old widow and retired teacher after 30 years in the classroom, had poured my entire heart, had closed later than usual tonight, and now I was driving through the familiar cobblestone streets of Old Town Richmond. In the back of the truck, baskets of leftover bread sat in silence. I never throw away leftover bread. Every night, I take it to the homeless sleeping under the bridges or to the kids who hang around near the city market. It's been a custom of mine since I opened the bakery, a way to keep a little warmth in my soul. Passing by the silent market now, the headlights of my truck illuminated a figure huddled under the awning of a closed produce stand. She was sitting on a damp piece of cardboard, wrapped tightly in a thin scarf. I slowed down, pulled over to the curb, and grabbed a bag of still warm bread from the passenger seat. I opened the door. The cold wind hit my face and the rain instantly slicked my clothes. I approached, the sound of my shoes echoing on the sidewalk. "Hello," I said softly, gently. "Are you hungry? I brought some bread." I held the bag out toward the young woman, waiting. She lifted her head. The light from the storefront illuminated her face, revealing swollen eyes, sunken cheeks, and bluish lips. My heart stopped. It was Sophia, my daughter. Her belly was swollen, taut beneath the thin coat. She was 8 months pregnant. Her wet hair stuck to her forehead and her face was so pale it looked lifeless. I dropped the bag of bread. "Sophia," my voice cracked, barely audible. What are you doing here? Where is Mike?" I stepped closer and knelt in front of her, ignoring the rain soaking my knees. Sophia was trembling, her hands clutching her belly. She tried to speak, but the tears choked her words. Finally, she managed a phrase, her voice raw and fragmented. "Mom, he took everything. He took everything. I didn't ask anything else." Rage surged into my chest like fire, but I swallowed it. I took off my heavy coat and draped it over her shoulders. Her shoulders were so small, so fragile, trembling beneath the fabric. I helped her stand. I practically held her up completely. Sophia stumbled as she walked, one hand still over her belly. I opened the truck door, settled her into the passenger seat, and carefully fastened her seatbelt. She said nothing, just stared out at the rain with an empty gaze. I picked up the soaking wet bag of bread I had dropped and tossed it into the back of the vehicle. That bread meant nothing anymore. I slammed the door shut and got into the driver's seat. Before pulling away, I looked through the windshield into the darkness, as if Mike Brennan might be hiding somewhere. The anger flared up again. I slammed the accelerator, hearing the tires squeal on the wet asphalt. The truck headed toward the bakery, where my small apartment was located upstairs. Sophia leaned her head against the window, her breathing barely perceptible. I gripped the steering wheel hard, trying to stay calm, glancing at my daughter occasionally. Raindrops slid down the glass like questions I still didn't dare to ask. The sound of the wipers kept a constant rhythm, sweeping the rain from the glass. Sophia had fallen asleep, her head resting against the window, her breathing shallow. Her hands still hugged her belly, as if she feared losing her unborn child. The silence inside the truck was thick, like a veil dragging me back to old memories, to those years when I thought everything was in its proper place. I remember my 30 years teaching at Oakwood Elementary. The smell of white chalk dust, new paper, the voices of the children shouting, "Mrs. Hayes!" I dedicated my life to teaching, believing that every child held a seed of goodness within them. In the afternoons, I stood in front of the board, correcting letters one by one, telling stories about honesty, about family love. I truly believed I was sowing good things. When I retired, I used all my savings to open the Haven Bakery. Haven was the hope for a peaceful old age, for seeing Sophia happy. The shop was small, on a cobblestone street, with a blue wooden door and a sign with gold letters. Every morning I rose early to knead dough, baking artisan rolls, cinnamon buns, and tres leches cake. The aroma of butter and cinnamon spread, bringing a simple joy. I remember Sophia's wedding day. St. Michael's Chapel shone with candles. Sophia walked in radiant in her white dress with gardenias in her hair. Mike stood beside her, elegant in his black suit, smiling confidently. He took her hand and swore sweet promises. "I will always take care of you." I was in the front row, tears rolling down my cheeks. It wasn't sadness, it was happiness. I thought my daughter had finally found her place in the world. To give them a good start, I used what was left of my pension to buy them a house in the meadows. It was a small, pretty house with cream walls and a fence covered in red climbing roses. In the backyard, there was enough space for a swing set where I imagined children playing. I asked the lawyer to put both their names on the property deeds. "It never hurts to be cautious," I told her. I thought it was the right thing to do, a gift for my daughter's future. For the first few years, Mike was the perfect son-in-law. He called me Mom in a warm voice and always brought a bunch of daisies when he stopped by the bakery. On weekends, he came with Sophia to help me. He rolled up his sleeves to carry sacks of flour while Sophia decorated cakes. He told me my tres leches cake was the best in the world and laughed loudly when I playfully tapped him on the head. He had a degree, a good job in the financial sector, and spoke of big plans. I looked at him and thought, my daughter chose well. But the cracks began to show silently, like rain seeping through a roof. Sunday dinners at the bakery became less frequent. Mike started being very busy. An emergency trip to New York, he would say, or a meeting with an important client in Atlanta. At first, I didn't suspect anything. "It's just the job," I told myself. Sophia didn't say anything either, just smiled gently when I asked, but her smile no longer sparkled as it once had. It faded like a lamp whose battery was slowly dying. Every time I went to their house, that home which had once been full of laughter, now felt icy in its silence. The windows were always closed. The climbing roses in the yard withered. Sophia still greeted me with a smile, but I noticed the increasingly deep circles under her eyes. "Are you tired?" I'd ask. "I've just been busy, Mom," she'd reply in a soft voice, like the wind. I wanted to believe her, but my heart began to feel heavy. One Tuesday afternoon, I baked a sweet corn cake, Sophia's favorite since she was a little girl. I wrapped it carefully, determined to surprise her. I drove to the meadows and parked in front of the rose-covered fence. The house was silent. I used the spare key to open the door. The air inside was stifling, as if no one had opened the windows all week. I called out, "Sophia, it's Mom." There was no answer. Then I heard a faint sob coming from the kitchen. I walked in and saw Sophia with her back to me. Her shoulders were shaking. One hand rested on the countertop, the other covered her mouth. I placed the cake box on the table and approached. "Sophia," I called. She jumped and quickly wiped her tears. "Mom, you didn't tell me you were coming." Her voice tried to sound cheerful. Her eyes were red, but she forced a smile. I asked, "Are you crying? What happened, sweetie?" Sophia shook her head vigorously, waving her hands. "It's nothing, Mom. I was cutting an onion. It made my eyes sting." She pointed to the cutting board, but there was no onion there. I looked at her, wanting to ask more, but Sophia quickly led me to the table, chattering. "You brought sweet corn cake. That's great. Sit down. I'll make you some tea." She opened the box, took a piece, and took a bite. "It's delicious, Mom," she said. But I noticed her hands trembling. She talked nonstop about the weather, about the customers at the shop, giving me no room to say anything. I wanted to press her for the truth, but her eyes seemed to plead with me. "Don't ask, Mom." I looked at her. I saw her hands intertwined on the table and knew she was hiding something from me. The sound of the windshield wipers had stopped long ago, but the memories kept flowing, carrying me back a year, when Sophia called me to say she was pregnant. Her voice on the phone shone like a sunbeam breaking through the rain. I was in the bakery with my hands covered in flour and smiled until my eyes filled with tears. I thought it was the beginning of happy days, but that joy didn't last. The cracks began to appear, sharp as broken glass. It all started with a mid-range Chevy Malibu. I had helped with some of the money to buy it, thinking a nice car would be useful for her to get around. One afternoon, I stopped by their house and saw Mike had parked Sophia's old Ford Focus in front of the gate. He came in with his shirt sleeves rolled up and a big smile. "Mom, I sold the Malibu," he said enthusiastically. "The used car market is booming. I got a good amount, enough to invest in a new high-yield fund. We'll use this one for now. It saves more gas." He said it as if it were a master stroke. I nodded, though I felt a pang of unease, but I told myself, he works in finance. He knows what he's doing. Weeks later, Sophia's pregnancy was evident. She wore loose clothing and instinctively stroked her belly with a sweet gaze. One night, Mike invited me to dinner. The table was nicely set, with candles lit. After dinner, he placed a stack of papers with hard covers and small print on the table. "Mom," he said in a grave, confident voice, "I have a practically guaranteed investment opportunity, but I need strong capital. I thought we could take out a small mortgage on the house, just a small portion of its value. Once I get the profits, I'll pay the bank immediately, and what's left over will be for our son to attend an international school." I frowned. The house was a gift for Sophia, her safe place. To risk it? I shook my head. "Mike, the house is a home, not something to gamble with." He looked at me with a slight expression of disappointment. Then he changed to a soft expression, took my hand, and lowered his voice. "Mom, I know you're worried, but times have changed. We have to take advantage of opportunities. Do you trust me? I'm doing all this for Sophia and our son. I want your grandson to have the best possible life." He looked at Sophia, who was sitting in silence, stroking her stomach. She looked up, full of hope. "Mom, the baby is going to need a lot of things," she said quietly. My heart softened. The love for my daughter and my grandchild won out. I nodded, even though I felt a weight in my chest. Once I stayed late at their house helping Sophia prepare the nursery. She chose each tiny garment, folding them carefully, humming a lullaby. It was almost 11:00 p.m. Mike was in the shower. The sound of running water came from the bathroom. His phone was on the coffee table and the screen lit up. I glanced over unintentionally. A message popped up on the locked screen from Chloe D. "Are you asleep yet, my love? I miss you." I felt a knot in my chest. I picked up the phone and went to the bedroom where Sophia was still folding clothes. "What does this mean, honey?" I passed her the phone, trying to keep calm. Sophia looked at the screen. Her face went pale for a second, but then she smiled, a forced smile. "Oh, that's a friend of his, Mom. She likes to joke around like that, messing with Mike. It's nothing. Don't worry about it." She snatched the phone from me and put it in a drawer with a movement so quick, as if she wanted to bury that message. I looked at her, wanting to say something, but her eyes pleaded with me. "Don't push it, Mom." I kept silent again, choosing to believe her, even though the doubt gnawed at me. But Sophia's body couldn't lie. She was getting thinner. Only her belly grew. She had deep, dark circles under her eyes, as if she hadn't slept in days. Once, I brought her a big bowl of homemade chicken noodle soup, her favorite dish since she was a child. I cooked it all morning, meticulously choosing the ingredients and preparing the broth with care. But when I arrived, Sophia barely tasted a few spoonfuls and pushed the bowl away. "I feel nauseous, Mom," she said in a weak voice. "It must be the pregnancy." I asked, "Are you okay, sweetie? Is there anything you want to tell me?" She shook her head and smiled weakly. "The doctor says it's normal to feel tired when you're pregnant. Don't worry." But I noticed how her hands trembled holding the spoon and how she avoided looking me in the eye. She was building a wall between her and me, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't cross it. Before continuing, if you have ever seen yourself reflected in this story, leave a comment. I promise you are not alone. The squeal of tires on the wet cement in front of the bakery yanked me back to reality. I turned off the engine, taking a deep breath, trying to contain the rage boiling inside me. Outside, the rain had stopped, only scattered drops falling on the windshield. I looked at Sophia. She was awake now, huddled in the passenger seat, her head resting against the window, eyes narrowed with exhaustion. I got out of the truck and went around to open her door. Sophia could barely move on her own. I helped her out, feeling the weight of her and my unborn grandson. The scent of butter and cinnamon wafting up from the bakery on the first floor usually comforted me every day. But tonight, it only made my chest ache. I led her to the small apartment in the loft where she grew up, where laughter once reigned. The room brightened when I flipped the switch. The warm glow fell on Sophia's face, revealing her swollen eyes and bruised lips. I didn't say anything immediately. I went to the kitchen. I prepared a basin with warm water and a little salt. I knelt in front of her and washed her swollen, muddy feet. The grime washed away, revealing her pale skin. Sophia remained motionless, her gaze lost in the void, as if her soul had left her body. I took a clean, soft cotton pajama set and handed it to my daughter. Then I brewed a cup of chamomile tea and placed it in her hands. The steam blurred her vision. Only when Sophia was curled up on the sofa, trembling while clutching the cup, did I sit beside her. I put my hand on her shoulder, speaking as softly as possible. "Now, tell me everything, sweetie. Tell me everything that happened." That was all it took for her to break into tears. It wasn't the contained sobbing I had heard earlier in the kitchen. It was a heart-wrenching cry, as if all the pain she held inside had suddenly burst forth. She hugged her belly, her shoulders shaking, tears falling into the cup, rippling the water. I let her cry without interrupting, just squeezing her hand tight. Through the sobs, the truth surfaced, piece by piece like broken glass. "He has another woman, Mom," Sophia said, her voice hoarse. "I found emails 2 years ago. I tried. I thought he would change because of the baby. I didn't tell you anything because I was ashamed. I was afraid of hurting you." She paused, breathing raggedly. "He sold the house, Mom. I don't know how he did it. I swear I never signed any papers to sell it. A few weeks ago, he gave me some documents. He said they were investment papers, like the time before. He asked me to sign where it was marked that it was bank stuff. I was so tired. I believed him. I didn't check carefully, but I am sure there was nothing about the house in there." I squeezed her hand, trying not to let the tremor show in my own voice. "What else, honey?" Sophia bowed her head, tears falling onto her legs. "He wants to marry her. He gave me the divorce papers. He asked me to sign them. I ripped them up in his face. He just laughed. Said whether I signed them or not, it was all decided anyway." She continued speaking, her voice getting lower, as if each word pained her. "This morning, after my OB appointment, I came home and the lock had already been changed. He threw my things in a garbage bag outside. He sent me a text. 'It's over.' And then he blocked me." I felt as if my blood had frozen. But Sophia wasn't finished. "He took my cell phone days ago, said it was broken and he'd buy me a new one. I don't have a dime, Mom. I tried to walk here, to come back to you. But it was raining. I was exhausted, and the pain in my stomach wouldn't let me keep going. I was scared of losing my baby. I just sat under that roof, not knowing what to do." Her final words were lost in sobs. I held her close. I let her cry on my shoulder. The rage I felt no longer burned. It had solidified into a sharp block of ice. I stroked her hair, feeling her shallow breaths. When the sobs subsided, I looked her in the eye. "Sleep, honey," I said, my voice firm, clear as a sentence. "Leave everything to me. I swear to you." "Mike Brennan is going to pay for every tear you have shed tonight." Sophia nodded, closing her eyes, as if my promise were the only remedy she needed. By morning, the smell of toasted bread wafted from the kitchen, but no one in my small apartment was hungry. I placed a steaming bowl of chicken soup in front of Sophia. "Eat, sweetie," I said gently but firmly. "You need strength." She picked up the spoon, bringing it slowly to her mouth, her gaze lost toward the window. Outside, gray clouds covered the sky, reflecting the heavy mood floating between mother and daughter. The sound of the spoon hitting the bowl broke the suffocating silence. Right then, the landline rang, a sharp sound cutting through the air. I answered, trying to sound calm, though my heart pounded loudly. "Hello, this is Jensen from Richmond Realty," a professional but dry male voice said. "I'm calling to confirm the appointment with Ms. Sophia Hayes for tomorrow to sign the final papers." Sophia started, opening her eyes wide and shook her head vehemently. I signaled her to keep silent and pressed the receiver closer. Sophia can't talk right now, I replied, my tone cold but controlled. Can you tell me? Jensen hesitated for a second and then continued. Yes, ma'am. We just need to confirm if Ms. Hayes will come to the office or if she authorizes her husband, Mr. Michael Brennan, to complete the transfer process, as he has done previously. The phrase, as he has done previously, felt like a stab in the chest. I took a deep breath and stated sharply, Mr. Jensen, there is a serious error here. My daughter has not authorized anyone. I demand that you immediately send me a copy of the sales contract and all related documents to this email address. I clearly dictated the bakery's business email address, giving him no opportunity to interrupt. Jensen awkwardly agreed and hung up. The room fell silent. I sat next to Sophia. I turned on the old laptop. We both stared at the screen, waiting. Every minute seemed eternal. Sophia took my hand, hers icy cold. Finally, a ping sounded. The email from Jensen had arrived. I opened the attached PDF, a contract dozens of pages long. I scrolled to the bottom where the seller's signatures appeared. Beneath the name Michael Brennan was a messy, recognizable signature. Beside it, under the name Sophia Reyes Brennan, was another signature that looked very much like my daughter's handwriting. Sophia leaned closer to the screen, her face pale. That wasn't me, she murmured, and then raised her voice charged with rage. Mom, I swear on my baby I never signed that paper. I stood up and walked to the oak cabinet in the living area. Inside, I kept an antique wooden box with my most cherished memories. I took out Sophia and Mike's marriage license, carefully framed. I put it next to the screen and pointed to her signature on that document. Look, honey, I told her firmly. The stroke of the letter S in this contract is too round, too perfect. You always make it a little pointy, and the cross line on your T slopes upward. This one is straight. This is a very well-executed forgery. Yes, but it doesn't fool your mom. Sophia looked at me, her eyes shining with hope and anger. I felt my fury transform into energy, sharp as a razor. I picked up the phone and called Jensen again. As soon as he answered, I spoke bluntly, my voice firm. Mr. Jensen, this is Eleanor Hayes. I have seen the contract. My daughter's signature is fake. This transaction is fraud. I demand that you halt the entire process immediately. If you and your company proceed, you will face legal consequences. On the other end, I could only hear his labored breathing until stammering he agreed. I hung up and looked back at Sophia. She was still hugging her belly, her eyes swollen but filled with determination. On the table, Sophia's wedding ring, next to the now-cold bowl of soup, caught my attention. The thin gold band with a simple engraving was the one I had chosen for her myself. Now it lay there, no longer on her finger, like a silent declaration that everything was over. Before I tell you the most important part, tell me, do you sense this is about to take a different turn? I want to read your opinion in the comments. 2 days passed in estranged silence. Jensen did not call back. Mike showed no sign either. The bakery remained open, but every cake I baked weighed as heavily as my heart. I knew that silence didn't mean he had given up. It was more like the calm before the storm. On the morning of the third day, the shop bell rang. A uniformed mail carrier appeared with a thick brown envelope in hand, the red seal of the family court clearly visible in the corner. I signed with a trembling hand, sensing that something bad was coming. I took the envelope to the kitchen where Sophia was sitting, hugging her belly, her gaze distant. We opened the envelope together. Inside was an official file, the notification that the court had accepted Michael Brennan's divorce petition. The first conciliation hearing was scheduled for the following week. Sophia stared at the pale sheet. But I ripped up that document when he gave it to me, Mom, she whispered, terrified. I never signed anything. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't sob. I placed the court summons next to the monitor, where the house sale contract was still open. 2 forged signatures, one for the house, one for the marriage, like 2 stabs from the same hand. Mike didn't just want to steal Sophia's home. He wanted to completely erase her from his life. I had run out of patience. The law was slow. I was not. Where is he? I asked, my voice firm. Sophia shook her head, her tears glistening. I don't know. Mom, he blocked me from everything. I looked at her and suddenly had an idea. I opened the computer, went to Facebook, and typed Michael Brennan. His profile was public, as arrogant as he was. The most recent post from 2 days ago showed 2 wine glasses on the balcony of a luxurious apartment. The status read, "Welcome to our new home, Westwood Estates. New life." He had checked into a luxury apartment complex in Westwood Estates, north of the city. I stood up and grabbed my truck keys. "Stay home and make sure you lock the door tight," I told Sophia firmly. "I'm going out for a bit. I'll be right back." She nodded, her eyes full of worry, but she didn't ask anything. I drove out of the old neighborhood, passing those familiar cobblestone streets, heading toward Westwood Estates. The glittering skyscrapers appeared before me, aloof and ostentatious, like a world Mike was building on lies. The contrast between my small bakery and this place squeezed my chest. I parked on the other side of the street, opposite the luxury building. The glass doors shone under the sun. I stayed seated in the truck, observing, my hands clasped tightly on the steering wheel. About 10 minutes later, a black Audi drove through the gate. Mike got out of the driver's seat, wearing a designer shirt and an arrogant smile. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door. A young woman stepped out of the car. She was slender, with long black hair, wearing an elegant summer dress. She smiled radiantly, holding Mike's arm as if they were the perfect couple. My heart pounded hard, not from rage, but from a strange premonition. When the girl turned to say something to Mike, the sunlight illuminated her face. I felt the world collapsing beneath my feet. It was Chloe Davis. Chloe, the best student I ever had. The girl with neatly braided hair who always won the speech competitions. The same one who wrote in her final essay that she dreamed of being a teacher like me. I had placed so many hopes in her. I saw her as a symbol of my faith in education, in goodness. But now she was here, hand in hand with the man who destroyed my daughter. The rage vanished, leaving a painful emptiness. Chloe wasn't a stranger. She was that child I had loved, of whom I was proud. Seeing her smile at Mike shattered my faith. I wanted to jump out, confront them immediately, but my legs wouldn't respond. I couldn't do it. Not yet. I started the engine, turned around, and drove away. Chloe's smile haunted me. It was no longer innocence, it was betrayal. There are pains that cannot be put into words. If you have ever felt something similar, leave me even a period in the comments. And now let's return to the story. In the following days, my bakery was like a silent fortress. The smell of baked bread was still there, but the joy had disappeared. I remained behind the counter, kneading, baking, but every movement was automatic. Sophia wandered upstairs, sometimes nauseous from stress. Her round belly left her exhausted. My smile for the customers was just a mask, hiding anger and pain. Mr. Jensen started calling insistently. At first, his tone was worried, almost pleading. "Mrs. Hayes, please cooperate," he would say. But after a few days, his voice became impatient. "The buyer is threatening to sue us for the delay. Mr. Brennan says you are sabotaging the sale to ask for more money. If you don't present clear legal evidence within 48 hours, I will be obligated to close the deal, by law." His words were like a countdown clock, pushing Sophia and me against the wall. I knew Sophia's signature was fake, but proving Mike was the culprit wasn't easy. I felt like I was in the middle of a desert, knowing there was water somewhere but unable to find it. Every night, I sat in front of the computer, reading the contract over and over, looking for a flaw. But it was all just numbers and dead words. One gray afternoon, the sound of the wind chime hanging on the door broke the dense air of the shop. I looked up from the pastry counter, ready to force a smile, but I froze. Chloe Davis was there, not in the designer dress she wore the day I saw her in Westwood Estates. She wore only a white blouse and simple jeans. She looked exactly like that student from years ago, with the same clear gaze and a shy smile. "Mrs. Hayes? May I come in?" she asked quietly. Rage and disappointment rose like fire. I crossed my arms. My voice was a block of ice. The shop is about to close. We have nothing to sell you. Chloe froze. The smile disappeared from her face. Teacher, did I do something wrong? She asked in a broken voice. I just wanted to come say hello. Just then the wooden stairs creaked. Sophia came down slowly, one hand resting on her belly. Seeing Chloe, her face lost all color. She clung to the railing as if she might faint. Chloe looked at her, then looked at me, her eyes full of confusion. I couldn't hold back anymore. I pointed at Chloe, my voice trembling with fury. You dare to ask what you did wrong? That radiant smile of yours in that luxury car? Do you know what paid for that? My daughter's tears, the roof she lost, my grandchild's future. Chloe stood paralyzed, her face pale as a sheet. She looked at Sophia, then at her round belly, and then at me. His daughter? His grandchild? She stammered. It can't be. Raphael told me he was never married. I am a teacher. I teach my students to look beyond appearances. And the truth here was that both Sophia and Chloe were victims of Mike's performance. I sighed. The rage subsided, giving way to an unwavering determination. He fooled us all, I said, looking at Chloe and then at Sophia. I took Chloe upstairs to the apartment. The three of us sat around the small oak table, gleaming with age. At first, the atmosphere was awkward. Sophia kept her head down, avoiding looking at Chloe, one hand over her belly. Chloe, sitting opposite, had her hands tightly clasped, her eyes full of guilt. But when Chloe began to talk, detailing every one of Mike's lies, I saw Sophia's shoulders relax. She lifted her head, her eyes blazing with fury, but not toward Chloe, toward the man who had betrayed both of them. I got up, prepared 3 cups of chamomile tea, and placed them on the table. Steam rose, bringing a soothing aroma. Crying and getting angry won't solve anything, I said, breaking the silence. Now we have to get back what is ours. My voice sounded serene, but inside, my resolve was sharp as a knife. Chloe looked up, her eyes filled with determination. I'm still with him, she said. He doesn't suspect anything. I can help. Her words made my heart pound. It was an opportunity, but also a risk. I looked at Chloe, worried, but she shook her head. I can do this, Mrs. Hayes. For you, for Sophia, and for myself. We planned everything clearly and coldly. Our testimony wasn't enough to sink Mike. We needed physical evidence, something irrefutable to prove he forged Sophia's signature. Chloe would return to the apartment in Westwood Estates, acting as a happy, unsuspecting fiancé. That was the most dangerous part. If Mike suspected anything, everything would fall apart. I asked her, does he have a private study? Have you ever seen him practice signatures or write anything odd? Chloe nodded. He has a small room. He always locks the door and spends hours in there. She paused, thinking. I once saw torn papers in the trash, but I didn't pay attention. I nodded. The first objective, find the sheets he used to practice Sophia's signature. They could be in the trash, in a locked drawer, or inside a notebook. Then Chloe remembered something, and her eyes widened. He has a small security camera on the studio shelf. He says it's in case of burglars. It activates with movement and saves everything to the cloud. My heart raced. That was it. If the camera recorded Mike forging the signature, we would have our strongest card. We agreed to use a system of coded messages to keep safe. The sky is beautiful tonight meant Chloe had arrived home and Mike was there. I'm craving your sweet corn cake meant he had left the study and she was starting to act. The brightest star tonight meant she had secured the video. Chloe left the bakery as it got dark, her gaze uneasy but determined. I hugged her and whispered, "Be careful. Honey." That night, Sophia and I couldn't sleep. We sat at the kitchen table in front of the old cell phone. Sophia held my hand, her palm icy. Every minute passed like an eternity. Then the phone vibrated. 9:15 p.m. Message from Chloe. The sky is beautiful tonight. I breathed deeply, but the tension still squeezed my chest. 10:30 p.m. New message. I'm craving your sweet corn cake. Sophia squeezed my hand harder. Chloe was in motion. The silence became unbearable for almost 20 minutes. I thought my heart had stopped. Then it vibrated again. 10:52 p.m. A photo appeared. Wrinkled sheets of standard paper covered in signatures. Sophia Reyes Brennan. Repeated over and over. The message read, "They were in the bottom of the trash." I looked at Sophia and saw her eyes shining. She no longer had the look of a victim. 11:10 p.m. Final message. The brightest star tonight. I have it. I hugged Sophia. We didn't say anything, just listened to the beat of our hearts. Half an hour later, there were soft but insistent knocks on the bakery's back door. Chloe entered, drenched from the drizzle. She handed me a small silver USB drive. "It's all here, Mrs. Hayes," she said, her voice trembling. The recording of him under the lamp, carefully copying Sophia's signature. I held the USB drive tightly. It was cold and rigid in my hand, like my own resolve. On the table, something small glittered under the light, the silver spoon I used to stir my tea. Sophia used to joke that it was Mom's lucky spoon because it always brought the best cups of tea. Now it was there, witnessing the moment we transitioned from victims to warriors. The next morning, I didn't open the bakery. Instead, I put on my dark blue dress, the most formal one I owned, reserved only for special occasions. The light of dawn streamed through the window, highlighting the folds of the fabric. I handed the silver USB drive to Sophia, placing it in her hand. "Watch it," I told her, my voice low but firm. "You need to see it to know we are not alone." Sophia connected the USB drive to the computer with a trembling hand. The screen lit up, and the silent video appeared. Mike under the desk lamp, meticulously forging my daughter's signature. Sophia held her breath, unable to tear her gaze from the screen. When the video ended, there were no tears, only a new firmness shining on her face like someone who had just found herself. I called Mr. Thompson, the best lawyer I knew, an old friend of my late husband. We agreed to meet at his downtown office, a solemn room with wooden shelves and the smell of old paper. I sat across from him and told him everything, from the rainy night to the USB in my hands. I showed him every piece of evidence. Photos of the papers filled with fake signatures, the house sale contract, and finally the video. Thompson examined it carefully, his sharp eyes behind his glasses. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair, took off his glasses, and rubbed his nose. "Mrs. Hayes," he said gravely, "this isn't just a civil lawsuit. This is a criminal case." Thompson acted fast. He filed the complaint with the court. He worked directly with the district attorney's office with the video as irrefutable evidence. An arrest warrant was immediately issued for Michael Brennan. The charges, fraud, forgery of documents, and misappropriation of property. I imagined what his arrest would be like, but I didn't expect it to be so quiet. 2 plainclothes police officers in an unmarked car were waiting for him in the parking lot of the building in Westwood Estates. Mike and Chloe had just stepped out. Perhaps they were going to dinner. "Are you Michael Brennan?" one of the officers asked. He nodded, still with his arrogant smile. The other showed the warrant. The arrogance on Mike's face froze and shattered into panic as they placed the handcuffs on him in front of Chloe. That was the last time she saw him as her partner. If this story makes you think of someone, don't keep it only to yourself. Share it, because sometimes that is enough to heal a part of your soul. On the day of the trial, the courtroom was charged with a heavy atmosphere. I sat in the front row next to Sophia, whose belly was now quite large. Mike was on the other side, next to his lawyer, haggard, with dark circles under his eyes. He didn't dare to look at us, his gaze low, his shoulders slumped. Chloe was called as a witness. She walked to the stand in a simple dress, her hair pulled back, firm like the exemplary student she once was. She clearly recounted every one of Mike's lies, how he manipulated her, and how she got the evidence that night. Her voice was steady, but I saw her grip the edge of the stand tightly. Her testimony was the final blow against Mike's defense. The video was projected onto a large screen. The room fell into complete silence. Only the hum of the ceiling fan could be heard. Mike lowered his head, unable to watch as he saw himself on screen, forging the signature. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a severe look, watched him. "Do you have anything to say?" she asked. Mike did not answer. He lowered his head even more in the face of the evidence. He pleaded guilty, organized fraud, forgery of public documents. The judge dictated a sentence of several years in prison. The sale of the house was annulled, and the property was returned to Sophia Hayes, its rightful owner. Several weeks later, at Mr. Thompson's office, we finalized the divorce without coercion, without forgeries. Sophia sat with her back straight, her hands steady. She took the pen and signed the papers. Her handwriting was clear and determined, not that of a victim, but of a survivor reclaiming her life. I looked at her, feeling a mixture of pride and pain. On Thompson's desk, a small object shone, the blue pen Sophia had used to sign. It resembled the one Chloe used to chew on during exams, but this one had no marks. It was simple, inexpensive, but today it was a tool of justice. I looked at the pen and recalled my teaching years when I believed every stroke told a story. And Sophia's signature today proudly told a story of strength and rebirth from the depths of her soul. Less than a month after the disaster, on a crisp autumn morning, Sophia gave birth to a beautiful boy. We named him Liam. When I held my grandson in my arms, feeling the warmth of his small body, I knew the storm had truly passed. His newborn cry was not one of sadness, but like a sacred song, marking a new beginning. I saw his pink face, his closed eyes, and felt that the future awaited us, clean, without traces of past pain. Before selling the house in the meadows, Sophia wanted to go back one last time. I drove there in silence. The house appeared with its climbing rose vine, still red, but a layer of dust covered the windows. We went inside. The air was still, as if time had stopped. I walked behind Sophia through every room where there had once been laughter and tears. She stopped in the bedroom where her wedding photo had hung. Now the walls were bare. Only rusty nails remained. Sophia looked around and said softly, "Let's go, Mom. There's nothing left for me here." There were no tears, only resolve. Sophia decided to sell the house with Mr. Thompson's help. The sale was quick. The day she received the money, I thought she would save a part to start over. But she surprised me. At Thompson's office, she wrote a large check and donated everything to a shelter in Richmond that helps women and children who are victims of domestic violence. "I want this money to rebuild lives, just like you helped me rebuild mine," she said, her eyes shining. I took her hand, pride overflowing. It was the moment I knew Sophia hadn't just survived. She had become a stronger woman than I ever imagined. Our lives found peace at the Haven Bakery. Every morning, I woke up early, kneaded, baked, and the aroma of butter and cinnamon filled the air. But the bakery wasn't just mother and daughter anymore. Almost every weekend, Chloe came by. It wasn't just a visit. She rolled up her sleeves, helped me stretch the dough, and laughed when flour stuck to her face. She held Liam, sang him lullabies, and helped Sophia clean the counter. The three of us, 3 generations, shared work, laughter, and even silences filled with understanding. Chloe found in us a family she never had, and we found in her a daughter, a sister. One sunny afternoon, I sat at the small table in the bakery's backyard. Sophia sang a lullaby while Liam slept peacefully in her arms, his cheeks rosy. Chloe carefully decorated a birthday cake, sticking her tongue out slightly in concentration. The scent of fresh-baked bread mingled with the aroma of baby milk, creating a fragrance that smelled like life. Seeing that scene, I understood that Haven wasn't just the name of the bakery. It was what we had built from the ashes of lies and betrayal. We rebuilt a new life, stronger, warmer, more full of hope than ever. On the table, a small object shone. The leather bracelet Sophia had made for me years ago when she was in elementary school, with a few wooden beads engraved with the word Mom. It's simple, worn, but I never took it off. Now it sits there under the sun, witnessing the path we traveled. Justice was served in the courtroom. But our greatest victory is this: a simple piece where the love and strength of 3 women are intertwined, impossible to break. I took a sip of chamomile tea and watched Sophia and Chloe laughing together as Liam stirred in his sleep. Outside, a gentle breeze passed, bringing the sweet aroma of autumn. I smiled for the first time in many months, feeling light in my soul. Mike paid for what he did, but what he could never take away was our hope. And that, precisely, is the legacy of the Haven. A year has passed since Liam was born. A year since Mike disappeared behind bars. The bakery still stands, tucked away on a little cobblestone street. But now it's not just a place where cakes are sold. It's a witness to the wounds that healed, to the new steps we took. Sophia no longer lives in the loft. She rented a small apartment near downtown Richmond, just a few blocks from the bakery. She has a small balcony where she grows pots of yellow chrysanthemums. They remind me of the teacups we shared, she told me, smiling gently when I visited her. She now works part-time at a nonprofit organization helping women escape domestic violence situations. The work is hard, the pay is not high, but every time she talks about a woman who recovered her freedom, her eyes shine. I look at her and see a new Sophia. No longer the girl huddled in the rain, but a strong woman healing herself by helping others heal. Chloe also changed after the trial. She left the luxurious apartment in Westwood Estates and moved into a small room near the university. She enrolled in a teacher training course, determined to fulfill her old dream. I want to be in front of a classroom. Just like you were, Mrs. Hayes, she told me, her eyes bright. Every Saturday afternoon, Chloe comes to the bakery, not just to help me, but also to learn to bake. She's clumsy at kneading, she burns the edges of the cakes, but she doesn't give up. Someday I'll make cakes as good as yours, she says, laughing with flour everywhere. I look at her and see my former student, but stronger now, like a young tree growing after the storm. Today the bakery is busier than usual. A group of women from the shelter Sophia donates money to came to visit us, bringing baskets of oranges and mangoes as thanks. They call me Ms. Eleanor. They vie to tell me stories and say my tres leches cake is miraculous. I smile, serving them tea, but I think of Sophia. The money from the old house served to build a new section for the shelter, with classrooms, a patio, and a small garden. They named the place Haven House. The name of the bakery, our name. Every time I hear that name, I feel warmth in my chest, as if all the pain we endured has transformed into something greater. Amidst the hustle and bustle of the bakery, the small bell hanging on the door rang. A middle-aged man entered, dressed in a simple jacket, holding a white envelope in his hand. "Mrs. Eleanor Hayes?" he asked courteously. I wiped my hands on my apron and nodded. He introduced himself as a representative of a charity organization from New York City. "We heard about what you and your daughter have done for the Richmond shelter," he said, extending the envelope. "We would like to invite you to a seminar to share your story and inspire others." I took the envelope, so surprised I didn't know what to say. "I'm just a lady who bakes bread," I replied with a soft smile. He shook his head, his eyes full of sincerity. "You have given hope to many people. That is the most valuable thing." I opened the envelope after he left. Inside was an official invitation and a plane ticket. The seminar would be in a month at a major conference center in the capital. I put the letter in my pocket, my heart somewhat stirred. I never thought my story was worth telling. I just did what a mother has to do: protect her daughter, demand justice. But looking around the bakery and seeing the women from the shelter laughing and talking, I thought of Sophia, Chloe, Liam. Perhaps this story is no longer just ours. At sunset, Sophia and Chloe arrived at the bakery with Liam. The little one was already toddling around the shop with a star-shaped cookie I made specially for him. Sophia sat beside me and told me about a young woman at the shelter who had just escaped an abusive relationship. "She reminds me so much of my mom," she said softly, stroking Liam's hair. Chloe nodded and added, "I'm teaching her to read. She wants to start over so she can eventually support herself." I looked at the two women and felt my heart warm. Not only did they survive the storm, now they are helping others find their way out into the light. On the counter, something shone under the light. An old dented tin tray, so old the paint was flaking off. I've used it since I opened the business, baking thousands of loaves, from rolls to cinnamon buns. Sophia used to joke that it was the bakery's good luck charm because the bread always turned out perfectly. Now it sat there, silently, witnessing the new steps we were taking. I gently stroked the tray, thinking about the seminar invitation. Maybe it was time to tell my story, not to boast, but to continue sowing hope, just as I sowed goodness in my students. The seminar in New York City was held at a massive conference center, with bright lights that seemed intent on dispelling every shadow. I waited backstage, with a sheet of paper in my hand where I had written a few lines, the key points I intended to speak about. The invitation envelope, already wrinkled from being opened so many times, was still in my coat pocket. I'm not used to speaking in front of an audience or telling my story. My heart pounded fiercely, but when the presenter announced, "Eleanor Hayes," I took a deep breath and walked out into the light. The auditorium was full, from social activists to women bearing invisible scars, looking at me with eyes full of expectation. Some smiled to encourage me. I placed the paper on the podium. I didn't need it anymore. I began to speak in a measured, calm voice about the cold, rainy night I found Sophia huddled under an awning, about the silent cracks in a seemingly happy family, and about how Mike betrayed not only my daughter, but also Chloe's trust and mine. I spoke about the Haven Bakery, about Haven House, and about the path that 3 women traveled to rise from the ashes, seek justice, and rebuild our lives. When I finished, the auditorium was silent for a few seconds, and then erupted in applause. Some people wiped away tears. I bowed respectfully, feeling light in my heart, as if a great weight had been lifted. After the talk, an older woman approached me, holding a handkerchief embroidered with daisies. "Thank you, Eleanor," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought I couldn't start over after what my husband did to me, but listening to you, I want to try." She took my bony but warm hand. I said nothing, just squeezed her hand gently and smiled. The handkerchief with those painstakingly embroidered daisies reminded me of the cups of chamomile tea back at the bakery. It was a small item, but it carried a promise that every person, no matter how wounded, can find the light again. Upon returning to Richmond, I found the Haven Bakery more lively. News of the seminar had spread, and many people were stopping by not just to buy bread, but to talk. Some women from Haven House began learning to bake with me, saying they wanted to be independent, to set up a small stand to support their children. "Ms. Eleanor, show us how to make that tres leches cake," one young woman said, laughing, still clumsy with the rolling pin. I nodded and showed her how to cream the butter, feeling a warmth in my heart seeing her eyes light up, just like Sophia's had in the past. Sophia and Chloe were also busier. Sophia was promoted at the nonprofit organization. She now runs a training program for women. "I want them to have a job, Mom," she told me firmly, "just like you gave me the strength to stand up." Chloe is about to finish her teacher certification. She was accepted at an elementary school near the bakery and has already begun preparing her classes. "I'm going to teach them proper penmanship, just like you taught me," she said, smiling as she showed me a notebook filled with careful lettering. One night, we organized a small celebration in the bakery's backyard. String lights twinkled overhead, and the smell of toasted bread and tacos floated in the air. Sophia held Liam, who was already saying "Grandma" in a playful voice. Chloe brought a cake she made herself, shaped like a full moon. The frosting was a little lopsided, but made with so much love. "Consider it my final exam, Mrs. Hayes," she said, her face red with embarrassment. I cut the cake and congratulated her, even though the frosting kept sliding off one side. We sat around the table, eating, laughing, and talking under the lights. Some women from the shelter also came, bringing their stories. One told about her new job. Another boasted that her son had started kindergarten. I looked at them and saw myself, Sophia, and Chloe in our darkest days. But now we were here together, like family. On the table, a small object shone under the hanging lights, an old oil lamp with a cracked glass chimney that I used when the power went out at the bakery. It was simple, but it always provided light on the darkest nights, when the rain lashed the windows and everything seemed lost. I looked at the lamp and thought about the promise I made under the auditorium lights. We didn't just survive the storm that was Mike. We illuminated each other and those around us. Haven House isn't just a collection of apartments. It is our resilient spirit, firm, always seeking the path to the light. When the party ended, I got up to clear the table. Sophia and Chloe helped me. Liam slept peacefully in his stroller, his hand still clutching a star-shaped cookie. A gentle breeze passed, causing the string lights to sway, casting flashes of light over the patio. I looked at the 2 young women who were now strong women and thought of all the people our story had touched. "Mom, what are you thinking about?" Sophia asked, holding a tray of pastries. I smiled, stroking the oil lamp. I'm thinking we've achieved much more than I ever dreamed, I said softly. I went into the shop, turned off the lights, and left only the oil lamp lit. It burned steadily, small but firm, like the hope we had sown. Mike could have tried to extinguish our light, but he didn't know that true light never goes out. It continues to burn here, in this bakery, in the women we help, and in the days to come, where we will continue to walk without fear, without giving up. After all, if there's one thing I want to share, it's this. Never underestimate your strength when someone in your family has been harmed. To those who are trapped in pain, as I was, you are not alone. No matter how deep the wounds, no matter how thick the darkness seems, you can still rise, reclaim justice, and most importantly, rediscover yourself. To the liars, to the Mike Brennans out there, you might think you're clever, that you know how to hide things, but the truth always finds a way to come to light. And when that truth is protected by courage and love, no one can escape the price they must pay. And to women like Sophia and Chloe who were once deceived, who once fell, I want to tell you, you are not weak. You are living proof that despite the pain, a woman can rise up, become stronger, nobler, and inspire the entire world. My story of vengeance, in the end, wasn't just about punishing the wrongdoer, but about reigniting the belief that justice exists, that goodness can be reborn, and that what is broken can also be healed with love and resilience. The story you have just heard has changed names and locations to protect the identity of the people involved. We tell it not to judge, but with the hope that someone listens and pauses to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you choose silence to avoid conflict? Or would you have the courage to face it all and reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion on this story of painful histories or any suggestions so we can improve our content. God always blesses, and I firmly believe that courage leads us to better days. Now, on the final screen, I leave you with two of the channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next narratives.